Hey everybody. Okay, so this is tonight's homework. This is for Wednesday. It's on round decimals. And let's look at the first question. Let's see if I can get this enlarged just a bit. There we go. All right. Write the place value of the underlined digit, then round each number to the place of the underlined digit. So let's take a look at the first one. I see this underline. Remember, if you need to write out a place value chart, you have ones. This is tenths. I can just put it like this. This is hundredths. And this is thousandths. If I see the 7, the 7 is in the tenths place value, so I'm writing tenths here. Now I'm going to round. Remember, I'm going to, if you can see that right there, since this is where I'm at, I'm going to the right side, 5 or more, add 1 more, so this is plus 1. So this, and then everything else becomes zeros, so this is 8 tenths. So I get number 2. I have 4 and 71 hundredths. The 7 is in the hundredths place value. Need to go to the right. This is my rule. This is 4 or less. Let it rest. So that becomes a 0. And then it's just 4 and 7 hundredths. Remember, the one that is underlined is the one that's either going to stay the same or change. Let's go to the next one. Okay, let's go ahead and use this one right here. I had handed this out to you on, see, this is Wednesday, on Monday. And if you need extras, they are in front of my desk so that you can get it. On here, it has 21 and 939 thousandths. I only have the ones place value here, but I can also make this a tens. So I'm going to put my 2, my 1, my decimal point, 939. I'm going to the underlined number, and that's going to be in the ones place. I'm going to the right, 5 or more, add 1 more, so I'm doing plus 1. So I'm going to bring down my 2. 1 plus 1 is 2, and now everything becomes zeros. So my answer is 22. I can place zeros down here. I can add that decimal, but it's still 22 wholes. Let's see if you can see that. There we go. It's still going to be 22 wholes and no fractions. Okay, let's do it that way. Okay, let's go to the next one. I'm going to put this number on here. I have 8 and 155 thousandths. I have my 1, which is underlined. Moving to the right, 5 or more, add 1 more, so this becomes plus 1. I'm bringing down the 8, my decimal point. 1 plus 1 is 2, and everything else becomes zeros. So here I have tenths, and then it's going to be 8 and 2 tenths. The next one, I have 34 and 9 tenths. So I don't have the tens here, so I'm just going to add that in. This is 34 and not 9 tenths, 9 hundredths. I think I said tenths, but it's 9 hundredths. The number that is or the digit that is underlined is 3. I'm moving to the right. It's 4 or less, so I'm going to let it rest. So everything becomes zeros. So the number stays the same, so it is 3. And I'm going to put that it is in the tens place. Actually, it's not 3, but it's what? 30, because I have to put that 0. Because the 3 is in the tens, and so it's going to be 30. Let's do number 6. The number is 4 and, here's my decimal point, 276 thousandths. The number that is underlined, or the digit that is underlined, is 7, which is in the hundredths place value. I'm moving over to the right. 5 or more, add 1 more, so this is plus 1. This now becomes a 0. I'm going to bring everything down, starting on this left side, the decimal. That's 2. 7 plus 1 equals 8. So the answer is 4 and 28 hundredths. What I want you to notice is that the number that is being rounded, since it was in the tenths, the answer is in the tenths. Because it was in the hundredths, then you will end in the hundredths here. Because it was in the ones right there, this now becomes the 22, so the number ends in the ones place. In the tenths, the number ends in the tenths place. For the tens, the number ends in the tens place. In the hundredths here, the number ends in the hundredths place. So I want you to make those connections. All right, let's move over to the next one. I need to round 8 and 293 thousandths to the place named. So here it says to the hundredths. I'm going to enlarge that just a bit. I'm going to move over here to my paper, see if we can get it all in. And I'm going to place that number 8 and 293 thousandths. So I'm going to look here, it says to the hundredths. So I'm going to underline the 9 in the hundredths. I'm going to move to the right. And remember, it's 4 or less. I let it rest or leave it alone. It stays the same. I say let it rest because it rhymes. You may have had a different rhyming to remember, so use what you know. 5 or more, I add 1 more. So that's a plus 1. Again, you may have your own. You can use that for you remember. If you don't, this is what I use, and it helps me remember. So I have 3 that is less than 4, so I'm going to let that rest. And now my answer is 8 and 29 hundredths. Because it was in the hundredths, 8 and 29 hundredths, the number ends in the hundredths place value. The next one is going to be tenths, so I'm going to write this number down. 8 and 293 thousandths. Says I'm going to the tenths, so that's my 2. Always go to my right. 5 or more, add 1 more, so it is. So put plus 1. I'm done. These become zeros. 8, 2 plus 1 equals 3. So it is 8 and 3/10. Again, it ends in the tenths because that's where I said I needed to change or stay the same. Number 9 says I'm going to take the number in the ones place. So I'm going to repeat that number, 8 and 293 thousandths. I'm going to underline the number in the ones place because that's what it tells me to do. I'm going to move to the right. 4 or less, let it rest. So that stays the same. These become zeros. And my 8 stays as 1. So this is the ones place, it's 8. Now I have a larger number for 10, 11, and 12. Round 12 and 462 to that place value. So I'm going to write tens here and put 12 and 462 thousandths. It says I'm going to the tenths place, so I'm going to underline the 4, move to the right, 5 or more. Very good. I'm going to add 1 more. So I'm going to bring down my 12, and 1 plus 4 equals 5. Everything else becomes zeros. So here the answer is going to be 12 and 5/10, because it says it's going to be stopped at the tenths place. Go to another sheet of paper. Oh, I did not do front and back on this one. Going into the writing the same thing down, sorry about that. 12 and 462 thousandths. Then I'm going to the hundredths place. The number is 6. I'm going to write it over here. 5 or more. Add 1 more. So this is a plus 1. 4 or less. Let it rest or stay the same. Okay, so that's what I have there. So it said to go to the hundredths. Move over to the right. The 2 is less than 4, so I'm going to just leave it alone. And this is going to be 12 and 46 hundredths. And there you go. It ends in the hundredths. The last one is in the ones place, so I'm going to write this. This is tens. 12 and 462. Let me go ahead and just change that 4 a little bit higher because it's a little too low. Said I'm going to the ones place. Over, it is 4 or less. I'm going to let it rest. And then the answer is 12. Bring down the rest, and it was 0. And it stops in the ones place at 12. Okay, let's go to the next problem, number 13. And we're going to be using this chart here. Let me just shrink just a bit. There we go. All right. What is Anita's speed rounded to the nearest hundredths? So I'm coming over to Anita. Coming back over into my chart. And I'm going to write in, I have 0 ones, decimal point 277 thousandths. So I have that here. And it said I was going to round it to the nearest hundredths. So I'm going to underline hundredths, match that up, hundredths and hundredths. Okay, underline 7, move to the right, 5 or more, yes. So this is plus 1. I'm done. That becomes a 0. So I have, starting from the left, moving to the right, 0 and 2, and then 1 plus 7 equals 8. So it's going to be 28 hundredths. And then here it's going to be meters per second. So these are their speeds, their runner speeds. Look at number 14. The speeds of 2 runners when rounded to the nearest tenth are the same. Which 2 runners are there? Rounded to the nearest tenth. Okay, so let's take a look. I'm going to take the first one, and that's Luke. So I have 0 and 178 thousandths. I'm going to put Luke here. Then I'm going to have Margola at 169 thousandths and write her name over here. This is where I'm at doing this here so that you can see. Anita, we already know it's going to be 28 hundredths. And then Shatil, 0 and 289 thousandths. Okay, so let's take a look. It said round to the nearest tenth. So I'm going to underline my tenth. 5 or more, add 1 more. So it's 0.2, and everything else becomes zeros. So Luke is going to be 2/10. Round to the nearest tenth. 5 or more, add 1 more. So that's 0, and 1 plus 1 is 2. Everything else becomes zeros. So Margola is 2/10. Ah. Here is going to be 2/10. Round to the nearest tenth. This is plus 1. And this was going to be 3, 0, and 1 plus 2 equals 3, and the rest becomes zeros. And remember that on on Anita, I'll just put her here. And this is a plus 1. 1 plus 2 equals 3, and that's at zeros. All right, so runner speeds, who would have won? And it's going to be, and remember, the winners have the shortest amount of time. So the speeds of two runners who round it to the nearest tenth are the same. So on here, we're looking at the winners. So the two winners would be whom? Very good. It's going to be Luke and Margola at both at 2/10. So they're the ones that won the race, and Margola. We always have the situation. I really wish they would have changed that verbiage on here so that you would know, because these two also had the same at 3/10, but they are also the slower runners than the faster runners of Luke and Margola. Okay. Next one, let's look at 15. To which place value is the number rounded? And so we have this one at 8 and 293 to 8 and 29 hundredths. So let's place that on here. If this is where I had 8 and 293, and then I ended up getting 8 and 290, which place value did I run it, or did I round it to? Yeah, it was the hundredths, right? Because to the right, this is 4 or less. I let it rest. And that becomes a 0. So I rounded in the nearest hundredths. Let's look at 16. And I'm going to have to get another sheet. Which place value is the number rounded? Okay, so I'm going to write in 799 thousandths, 799 thousandths, and this is what I ended up getting was 8. The 8 is in what place value? The tenths. Very good. So I rounded to the nearest tenth. So I did a plus 1, and these became zeros. So if you look at even here, the 9 ends up in the hundredths place value, so you rounded it to the nearest hundredths. You see that? The 9 is in the hundredths, so you rounded it to the nearest hundredths. The 8 is in the tenths, so you rounded it to the nearest tenths. And we proved it over here in our work. Look at this one here. It says, which number is 5 and 389 thousandths? Round it to the nearest hundredths. I'm going to place that number into my place value chart. So it's 5 and 389 thousandths, and it said hundredths, so I'm going to match that up. Move to the right, 5 or more, add 1 more. So I'm going to have 5 and 3, 1 plus 8 equals 9. So the answer is C. You see, if you do it this way, how much easier and stress-free you can get. And you also have your evidence proved here. Let's look at number 18. Which number is 7 and 323 thousandths rounded to the nearest tenth? So I'm going to go to the tenths. So I'm going to put this number into my place value chart. 323 thousandths. Going to the tenth. Moving it over to the right. 4 or less, let it rest. These now become zeros. So starting from the left, bring down my 7, decimal point 3. So the answer is A. Again, I have my evidence here to confirm 7 and 3/10. It did say tenths, so my 3 is going to end in the tenths. So you can immediately isolate these two, and then you would have just had to figure out. But know that 2 is less than 4, so you're going to let it rest. Next one, number 19. A baker uses 2 and 327 thousandths kilograms of blueberries for muffins. Okay. There are 4 packages of the fruit at the fruit market. Which amount is closest to 2 and 327 thousandths kilograms? Okay, so we need to see with that. So they ended up rounding it, right? So I'm going to go ahead and place this number here. 327 thousandths kilograms. And I'm going to look here. Which one would be closest? This has 2 and 3/10. Okay. This next one is going to be, I should write a little bit smaller, right? 2 and 3/10. I have 2 and 42. I think that's going to be way too big because there's nothing I could do to make that happen, right? So I'm going to eliminate that. The next one I have is 2 and 300 or 33 thousandths. Oh, well, look, that one would be even closer because if I rounded it to the nearest hundredths, then that becomes a 3. So ooh, that's a really good possibility. That's better than this one here. Well, and I know that there's no way that it can be 2 and 4/10 because this is a 2 here and it's let it rest. So it's either going to be the 2 and 3/10 or the one that's going to be closest is going to be the 2 and 33 hundredths. So you can see how we just added 1 more. So it's 2, the 3, and the 3 in the hundredths. Okay, good job. All right, let's look at this last one. Question 20. The chart shows the length of each student's pencil. Which person has a pencil length that can be rounded to the nearest tenth of an inch? Okay, so which ones can be rounded to the nearest tenth of an inch? Okay, so I'm going to put in Lori, 6 and 61 hundredths. Then I have Ping at 5 and 55 thousandths. Then I have Jason at 4 and 91 hundredths. And I have Annie Annie at 6 5/10. I'm going to look because I need to go to the nearest tenths, right? Well, there's nothing here, so I can't round that off to the nearest tenth. And it says that the length can be rounded up. It's got to be rounded up. Well, if I move here, that stays the same at 4 9/10. So that doesn't work for Jason. So I'm going to put an X there. Annie, there's nothing to the side, so that's not going to round up. So that doesn't work. Let me look over here for Lori. I move up. She's not going up. This is only going to stay at 6 6/10, and it says rounded up. So that doesn't go because she'll stay at 6 6/10, right? But let me look here at Ping. 5 or more, add 1 more. So the tenths moves up. So it's 5 1/10. So Ping is the correct answer. All right, that was it for tonight's homework. Review because you're going to be having a quiz on Thursday. All right, you guys have a great night.